recorded live.
Hello and welcome to the Virtualization Security Roundtable podcast episode number 93. We are 7 away from our 100th show, where hopefully we'll have something special going on. Joining us today as our panelists are Eben Rodriguez, who is IT industry veteran now serving as a cloud solution advisor for CA Technologies. Michael Berman, who is an independent consultant and subject matter expert in security virtualization. Boris Stronglin, who with 20 years of experience in software development, enterprise system, and security. Boris will be joining us as soon as he dials in. And myself, Edward Holetke, a.k.a. TechSciWhale, pretty much anywhere on the web, and author of the book VMware vSphere and Virtual Infrastructure Security, as well as VMware vSphere ESX and ESXi in the enterprise. Joining us today is Rob Rando, who is a principal security architect for VMware, and we wanted to talk about the VMware security changes that happened. So, Rob, without much further ado, why change the name? We're so
You'll have to
chilled.
Yeah, that I can't answer that for you, man. I'm not a marketing guy, so I don't know the reasoning behind the change. It's actually, one reason behind it is just really, I will say this, is the fact that vShield is very, obviously a security-centric name, and the concept of vCloud networking and security now is that there's a lot of network functionality, network integration that comes into play here. So I believe that they wanted to get away from the security-only kind of connotation and include the networking components in there as well. Because now VMware, we've actually got a whole business unit dedicated to networking and security.
So it's more of an alignment issue, align with the name, with the business unit, and so forth.
With what it does, right? Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
So VMware announced a few things at VMworld, and we've had all of us have had a time to settle down and think about them. So what were they? I mean, there weren't many from the security perspective.
Hey, Ed, I haven't had time to sit down and think about them, so that's a great question. What was announced?
Fair enough. So, in general, this concept is a vCloud networking and security suite. So basically, there's some licensing things that came about, some really nice things. So if you're an Enterprise Plus customer, for example, you're going to get the vCloud suite, which includes this vCloud networking and security standard components. But from an announcement perspective, I think the biggest thing was the release of these new components and the update for the 5.1 version of the Edge Gateway. By the way, now it's not just Edge; it's the Edge Gateway, because again, any of those networking functionalities and all of the new functionality along with that we could discuss if you guys want.
What was that new functionality? Why don't we start there?
Okay, we'll start with Edge. That's fair. So Edge now has gone from a very basic dual interface virtual firewall with some pretty basic firewalling capabilities to basic load balancing and site-to-site VPN type capabilities to what I would call a full-fledged enterprise-grade firewall. It's got the option to scale up to 3 different sizes, and you can start with what we call the compact, which is the old size version of 256 meg of RAM and one single vCPU, up to an extra large version, which is 8 gig of RAM, 2 64-bit vCPUs. So you can scale these up and out, really depending on what your throughput needs are in the environment. Other things that we added were, again, support from just going from 2 interfaces up to 10 interfaces. So as opposed to just, having an inside and an outside, now you can have 3 outsides and 7 inside, networks, or you can have 9 inside networks and 1 outside network, or no outside networks and a bunch of internals that you're just, routing between. So really just, it really allows you to scale out and protect a whole bunch more networks. The load balancer has been greatly, what's the term, improved. That's the term I'm trying to come up with. I think the biggest area there is the fact that, before it was just a basic HTTP load balancer. Now we've got HTTPS support. We've got and that is pass-through support. So it's not termination of the HTTPS sessions just yet, but it's pass-through support. We've got full TCP protocol support as well. So really any TCP port that you choose, we can go ahead and load balance that. We've improved the algorithm, added session persistence, help checking, make sure that websites are up, for example, before you're actually going to include that server in the pool for your load balance. And so a lot of really nice improvements. Makes it a very good very good load balancer for most organizations. Now, one of the really cool things that we've added from a integration standpoint is our new NetX APIs. And again, this kind of gets off a little bit of the topic of Edge, but I want to talk about it here because it makes sense from talking about the load balancer, is that we've extended these NetX APIs. So say, for example, you wanted functionality out of like an F5 load balancer that, does things like URL checking, where it's actually and modification in flight of those URLs, as well as things like looking for cross-site scripting, application layer type stuff. These new APIs allow the integration, say, of a more advanced load balancer like an F5 into the CNS manager, essentially, or into the components through these APIs, and to get that functionality, but also the ability to manage it right from the vCNS manager. By the way, the vShield naming is, while it's from a marketing perspective, John, if you look in the UI, it's still in the UI right now because the naming came a little bit late for the dev cycle. So you'll still see it all in the UI for now.
So let's take a step back here, and that is that you've added some availability constructs with the load balancer.
Yep.
You've resized the firewalls into small, medium, large. Now I'm assuming the small, medium, large are changes in the number of sessions per second, the number of new sessions per second, all those standard firewall-ish things that we all talk about.
Exactly. Yep.
And you've added actually redundancy into Edge.
Yeah, we've added redundancy in Edge. I didn't actually talk about that. So we do have the concept of HA for Edge, so where you can have an active and a standby.
And you've added in a larger number. Basically, you've gone to the Edge firewall, which is a VM. We all know that. To finally using the virtual hardware version 7 and 8 that includes the 10 VNICs.
Exactly. So we can use all 10 VNICs. It wasn't really the issue of virtual hardware before. It was actually just the Edge application inside that wasn't able to leverage all those VNICs, but now we can. So, or at least it wasn't exposed at that point. So now that's there. I think the core to with those, so you've got that full capability. I did want to kind of revisit the HA capability of Edge, the active standby. I think what's really neat about that is if you compare it to a physical HA type implementation, same type of idea where we're transferring the state tables between the active and the standby. But what's unique about it is if typically you lose a firewall because of a hardware failure, or power outage or something like that. So in our case, if you lose, say, a blade that one of the edges on, by the way, there's an anti-affinity rule to make sure that they never run on the same host. But if you do somehow lose a piece of hardware, obviously the standby will take over. And then the nice thing is, though, the primary that you lost, or even if it was the secondary that got lost, it'll go ahead and automatically restart on another host just leveraging vSphere HA. Where if you do that with physical firewalls, you pretty much, once you lose that physical firewall, you have to get that other physical firewall back up to get your HA capabilities back, or we'll automatically do it. So it's somewhat similar to what we can do with FT, but obviously it's not using FT in this case. But it's the same idea as far as the ability to restart that somewhere else. So that's a pretty nice feature.
Doesn't FT have its own? And that is that if you're running a set of instructions that are going to cause it to crater, it's still going to crater both sides of everything.
If it's an application issue, yes. I mean, if it's an application reason why it went down, yes.
Or an OS
HA or an OS issue, right? Of course, but I mean, HA capabilities are typically there designed around not protecting against the application. So hardware HA is the same thing. I mean, hardware firewalls, you lose if there's an issue with the software or the application running within the hardware firewall, you lose that. That's going to affect both sides as well. In our case, it's really about hardware failure. Is what that HA is for. So if you lose one piece of hardware, you have got the other to come up and take over for that. From an application perspective, we also do application monitoring. So if there is an application issue where the app has an issue, we will go ahead and be using the application HA capability in vSphere, as well as right within the application, so within the vShield itself, and go ahead and restart or reboot that firewall if necessary. But yeah, I mean, HA is typically a hardware, right? I mean, it's around protecting against hardware failures. And the software side of things, we use our application HA to deal with that.
Okay. So, and now the other thing that I noticed that was announced was vShield Endpoint is now free with version 5.1.
Correct. So it's actually no longer vShield Endpoint, it's vSphere Endpoint. So it's just part of the platform now. So it's included.
Okay, we're now changing the name exactly. So, we've got vSphere Endpoint, which basically should lower the overall cost of accepting offloaded antivirus, anti-malware.
Absolutely, it sure does. I mean, in many cases, a lot of folks would have it bundled already with like View Premier, but in the cases where it's for servers, we didn't have any bundles like that. So yeah, so it takes off that cost of having to buy Endpoint and the AV solution. Now you just need to buy the AV solution from our partner vendor.
Now, weren't they also bundling Endpoint with it anyways?
Some were. Trend Micro was. They had an OEM agreement where they could bundle that in, but there was still a cost associated with that. Now there is no cost associated with it, so they could basically at that point they're going to their pricing can reflect that as well, because they don't have to bundle in the cost that they had to pay us obviously for the Endpoint API. So even though they OEM'd it, they still there was still a licensing component to that.
So, anybody else have any other comments about what you guys heard about the vShield vCloud?
I just want to summarize a little bit. It sounds really positive. It seems like the enhancements are to add additional functionality, stability, like HA type features, and even increase the scale that you can. So I'm wondering if performance or throughput has been increased.
Yeah, it sure has. I mean, again, we still have the base system, which was the throughput from a bandwidth perspective was about 4 to 6 gigabits per second. But the kind of the large and then the extra large, or the normal and the extra large edges, increased that significantly. Where I think the extra large can get up in the area of 9 to 10 gigabits per second. I mean, almost full 10 gig throughput through them. There is an actual white paper out there that talks about the performance. But I think that talks. I'm thinking VXLAN actually. I'm not thinking about the edges. There is a presentation that we had somewhere that can talk about kind of the different sizes and what the throughput is of those. I don't have that handy right now, unfortunately.
I'd be interested in seeing that, Rob. If you guys, I guess if you could send it to us. I don't know if that's something we can put on our website or not.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I'll have to take a look at it to be sure, but I don't see any reason why not. So if I can get that out to you, I definitely will.
Great, because that's one of the concerns I've heard about the virtual firewalls versus traditional and physical ones is throughput and scale. And it seems like you've knocked a lot of the other objections out of the way with this update. So, definitely might be a good opportunity for a lot of customers to take a new, fresh look at this solution.
So, absolutely. I mean, admittedly, the first version was a first version, right? And this one has taken a massive, I would say, leap forward. Quite a bit better. Basically what we did is we took all of the complaints, if you will, and the suggestions of our customers and our partners and our service providers, especially, because they were probably the biggest users in this area, and really made a point to address all of those issues. So that was kind of the key for us is, again, taking that customer feedback and fixing things to the point where they're working the way
Awesome.
They need to be.
So, besides security, were there other things that you're aware of that were announced at VMworld?
So from a security perspective, from a networking, I mean, there's a number of things. Obviously some updates to vSphere. Nothing major, I would say, from a vSphere perspective. We've got the single sign-on capability now. There was some the TPM TXT stuff. I think one of the things I didn't even touch on yet, from a networking side of things, is VXLAN.
Hold off on VXLAN for a second, and that is
okay.
One of the things that the VMware Hardening Guide states, at least the latest version that I've seen, is that to enable Active Directory on your ESX, your vSphere host, and the single sign-on kind of dovetails with that one kind of nicely. But I find, from a security perspective, enabling Active Directory on my ESXi hosts is a really, really bad idea. And the reason being is that not everybody has their groups set up properly, so they allow anybody, their uncle, to access the host because they don't have the proper protections in place there. And why in the world am I allowing them access my hosts anyways? This is a break glass situation, folks. If you have to go to this console of your host, it's break glass, which means I should not allow anybody to do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's really the truly suggested method is to not allow access, basically to keep folks out completely.
But why in the world does the first thing in the Hardening Guide say institute Active Directory? And why Active Directory? I could use any directory service. For vCenter, I can see that, but for the
Active Directory is the one that's supported.
Active Directory is the one that's exactly. I mean, we don't have another directory service supported for ESXi.
But why even that one?
I will add that there are third-party solutions, I believe. I don't know if VMware is certifying or supporting those, but there are some third-party solutions to help with that.
But, it still begs the question, why even have that as the very first thing when the best practice is not to allow it? Is not to allow access except for break glass situations.
Well, because we do know people are going to do that regardless, and it is what it is. So if you're going using it, the functionality is there.
One person, guys. Go ahead and finish there, Rob.
Okay. So, the point is people will use it. We've, trust me, over the years I've tried to, frankly, again, really push people away from using that at all, and we always do that, and that's, kind of one of the things that we'll always talk about. That said, if a customer is using that, then they ought to do that.
I agree with you. If they are allowing it, yes, but they shouldn't be allowing it in the first place.
Yeah, that's a whole other. I think that's a whole other debate. Within,
I think it should have said only put on Active Directory if you are allowing access.
Yeah, that makes sense. Michael, you had something?
Michael, you were going to say something next?
The observation I was going to make, this is to support Rob's point, people are going to log in, but the nice thing about hooking it up with Active Directory is that you're now getting auditing through Active Directory of that activity. And
are you?
Certainly, I think you can.
Well, let's think about this. Think about the use case that I have for this one. This is an auditing question. So, Michael, you're perfect, and Boris, you know about this as well. My Active Directory server is hosted on the host that just died on me or just had a problem. I need to log in as using my Active Directory account. Now I can't because Active Directory is no longer available, folks. Network died or something weird happened that now I have to go to the console.
Yeah, that's true. It's just that in the enterprise,
I'll tell you what
typically.
To do there, Ed.
One person, Boris. First.
Yeah. No, Ed, you're right. Using Active Directory for all of your identity management presents a problem that if it goes down, then it's a single point of failure. So that's why in an enterprise, usually it's replicated. There's high availability. Added to Active Directory because it's just like DNS servers. You cannot have it died ever.
Okay. And Michael?
Yeah, I think that's right. So let's just examine what's going on here. If people are logging into ESX across the network, there's a lot of things we would all say about that. That has to be tightly controlled. That has to be audited. I would just offer that, allowing Active Directory to be your authentication store does not automatically make this worse, nor does it automatically mean that you can use it in other than break-the-glass situations. It doesn't have to be the Ed Halecki domain account or the Michael Berman domain account. You could have a different domain account with that access to ESXi that you don't normally have access to or the ability to use. It could be a break-the-glass password that has to be entered.
And that is what the single sign-on gives you, right, Rob, where you can now have multiple users that basically are delegated root users. Rob, you there?
Yep, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, that's exactly it. That is what single sign-on gives you. So is you've got these delegated users, and that's the point. And you get the logging capability, like Michael was making the point, within ESXi as well. So you get a little bit more as opposed to using just the root user.
So for a large group, like a large work site, I may have 20 or 30 different admins. I may have 5 of those that are allowed to break the glass. I could set up 5 individual single sign-on accounts that are delegated. They could be in an Active Directory and no others.
You got it, exactly. And again, that's going to be Active Directory best practices as opposed to our best practices, and that's something that you have to. You have to determine who's managing what, and that's always going to be an issue, regardless of.
Not only that, you have to worry about group issues because you want to limit this type of single sign-on to a single group. But if that group has other group members as part of it, or as part of another group, you may end up having more privs than you realize.
Well, right, but that's always been an Active Directory, best practice issue.
Well, it's a directory service problem, regardless.
Exactly.
And we talked about a few weeks ago a solution to that, so I've already blogged about it, so we won't go on to that one. You can solve that problem, but okay. But, that's the new feature. That's really great. Is it difficult to set up? Have you used it yet, Rob?
The single sign-on? Not. Yeah, I've literally just set it up yesterday the first time, so I've been doing some playing with it, and so far so good. It's a nice solution, and the good thing is, it's not just for, ESXi doesn't leverage it just yet, but the vSphere does on its own. ESXi is still going to use the AD directly, but then, our other solutions, it will eventually, and then the other solutions will also use it as part of, the overall solution as well. So, like vCloud Director plans on using it. The vCNS manager uses it as well. So, very nice solution. I just haven't, honestly, haven't done anything with it yet, so I need to start playing with it, to be perfectly honest.
Okay. And now the other question I have is that with all these changes to allow single sign-on, to get better audit logs of who did what, when, and where, have they actually handled the delegate user problem from vCenter or vCloud to vCenter to vSphere where they actually keep a task ID or some other ID in the audit log so I can map out who actually did what? Has that been done yet?
I'm not sure. Say that again. I'm not sure I understood what you were asking.
Well, this is an auditing question, an auditing problem, and when you have delegate users, regardless of who they are, if I'm at vCloud, I talk to vCenter using a delegate user. When I'm vCenter, I talk to vSphere using a delegate user, VPX user. And that means that I have to somehow correlate between vCenter, vCloud, vSphere, because I'm looking at the vSphere logs. I have to correlate them to the vCenter logs and maybe to the vCloud Director logs, but if they passed an ID all the way through, I could figure out who did what. And has anything like that been thought of yet?
I got you. So you're talking about the service accounts and the delegate. Now I understand what you're saying. No, not that I'm aware of. Not to this point yet, where the logging will essentially pass all the way through. The specific user down to, and actually log it properly by that user in ESXi, for example. I see what you're saying now. No, I don't believe that has been. As a matter of fact, I'm sure that has not been addressed.
So
yet.
Rob, let me ask you a question about that. You guys purchased a logging company recently, something to do with logging.
Yeah.
How might that potentially solve this problem for us?
Well, that in and of itself, I'm not sure is going to solve the problem directly, because if you look at, it is more of a log aggregator, and then, I take that back. It can help here because it can correlate, and it's designed around that, the correlation of your different logs. So, it can definitely help from that perspective, from a correlation and from an analysis perspective. Think of it in terms of another SIM type solution. We've been built. Basically, we purchased that company. I don't have all the details on exactly what we're doing with them. It was really more the technology actually that we purchased as opposed to the whole company. But basically, it's about the ability to search through massive amounts of data and make correlations of that. So that can help from that perspective. Again, it's not going to be direct to say, that we're going to attach an event to a specific person right off the bat, but I think if we can correlate those, through some sort of a SIM type technology like we're talking about here, I think we can do that as far as we're pulling the logs from all these different places.
Right. Yeah, I have a question about I have a question about this.
Go ahead, Boris.
One at a time.
Right. So Rob, yes, I think fundamentally the problem is that once you get to the vCenter issues commands to the underlying ESX hosts using service account, a single service account, pretty much. So, and I know we talked to VMware about this, and then that's the problem with vCloud as well. So basically, user identity does not propagate, from the management server down to the hypervisor, right? The management server uses a service account to talk to all the hosts, and at that point, you lose the user identity down at the hypervisor level. And the question to VMware, when we asked it several times, why not propagate that user identity? Just propagate user ID as a field, say, in the API calls. That way, you can actually log, down at the hypervisor level, who actually initiated the action. So it doesn't just come from vCenter. You know who initially started the action. So any thoughts on this?
You have other issues with that, and that is that it depends on how many layers you have in there and how many delegate users you have. So the idea, I think the best practice we can come out with, or the takeaway from this for logging and auditing, is that all your service accounts must be unique for starters. I mean, if we can say just that would be help correlate things. So don't use the same vCenter service account for every one of your vCenter services. Use one for VCOps, use one for vCloud. But think about it this way. What happens if I have products like Embotix or other products that have portals on top of them? So I log into the portal. The portal then talks to its own engine. That engine then talks to vCenter. I got 4 layers of different logging I have to do. The user is at the very top, not at the service accounts that are being used from that on. Right?
Yeah, it's the same problem, pretty much.
Or I'm talking about, like, say, for example, if I put anything in that in that path that could change things like a proxy, now we have a similar problem with who's really doing the logging in.
And the other problem with that, Ed, is as far as correlation goes, if you do it after the fact, especially as you get more and more automation and cloud in your environment, things can be batched up, and it's not so much real time. When you're sitting in front of a vCenter console and you say power on a VM or change some configuration, it pretty much does it while you're sitting there watching it, right? And then you wait for it to complete. But with cloud, it's like you put in a request and you hope it gets scheduled and done within the next few minutes, but there's probably hundreds and thousands of other requests going on at the same time by other users, right? So you can't just correlate who did what at what time. It needs really a little bit more tracking, as far as maybe like a token or a cookie or a request number, all the way through the chain, whether it's doing load balancers, firewalls, vCenter now. The data center is becoming more and more automated. We need a way to track those changes across the board.
Well, it starts with having unique service accounts, even for automation tools. This automation tool has its account. This automation tool has it. If we can start just there, I think we got a big win in being able to correlate who did what. But by the same token, we need same idea. I agree. We need some sort of token or tagging that we can pass with every request to say, this is really where it came from.
Exactly. I think that's what we've been pushing for some time, because we considered temporal correlations at HITRUST to correlate user actions with vCenter actions, and we decided that this is just too hard and too unreliable, because of multiple users, multiple tools can initiate similar actions at the same time. So it's very difficult to reliably correlate actions on the front end with vCenter commands to the back end. So the only way to really reliably do it is to propagate some kind of identity token down the stack all the way.
Rob, what do you think on these ideas?
I think they're great. I think they're great ideas. I mean, I think and I apologize, guys. I'm on the road as well, so I'm trying to mute out when I'm not talking. No, I think it's a great idea. I mean, if that's something that we could, you can add in there. The key thing is, you'd have to somehow. I mean, it's going to have to know about it all the way down the stack, so it can propagate that into the logs as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of layers of abstraction, if you will, that you have to deal with there. And again, I think the authoritative source. I mean, if it came from vCenter, or from vCloud Director, for example, this request, then you would want to go back to those logs, or from vCenter, the request came from vCenter, you'd want to go back to those logs to determine what potentially, did this or that. Obviously, if somebody does something directly on a host, that will be logged with the proper, with the proper user at that point, as opposed to the service account. So, I do agree. These are all great ideas, and I think these should be definite enhancements that should be considered, throughout the life cycle of the process. I really like the idea of propagating that token, if you will, or that identity down, each layer as it hits each component. Because you're going to hit, if you go to vCloud Director, vCloud Director is going to make the request to vCenter, and then vCenter is going to make the request down to the hosts themselves, right, and down to the storage, and the host will make the request down to the storage. So there's different areas that you have to look at, and there's all different trails, if you will, you have to try to follow. So, agreed.
And also, you could have vCenter, you could have vCloud Director talking to Orchestrator, then talking to vCenter.
Yeah, or talking to vShow Manager, which talks to vCenter. So you've got all these different paths, if you will, that you need to monitor as well. So I do like the idea of kind of on that initial request that some sort of within the request that the actual originating user ID gets included, and that gets passed all the way down through the process.
And I like that idea too, but also we need to ensure that, the takeaway that you can implement today, just make sure all your service accounts, regardless if they're talking to vSphere, vCloud, vCenter, your storage, all have unique IDs.
Yep, totally agree.
Start there. It does propagate a lot of problems with very, very large environments, but it's well worth doing. I had a customer that we weren't sure what was really causing the problem. We actually went in and made multiple user IDs for processing for a database, so that we knew, yes, it was this user that was doing the problem, instead of always using one. We can always do that same thing all the way up the tree.
Hey, Ed, I got a question. Maybe some of the other guys on the phone can help answer this. Are there companies, I've seen at some big enterprises, they have what's called Enterprise Service Bus that handles a lot of this auditing and messaging between various components. Where does VMware fit into that?
Doesn't use it. Not today.
Yeah, typically enterprise message buses are used for application integration. So people like MuleSoft and people like them, basically they integrate various enterprise systems. Like if you have a CRM, you have something else, you have accounting systems. Enterprise buses typically serve to integrate those systems. So I'm not quite sure how VMware Stack fits into that. I think from that point of view, VMware is just not an application there.
I think it would end up being, it's not an application layer at the same time. It is. The management side is definitely an application layer, but when you talk about the host, it really is the endpoint, unless it's talking to storage.
Right.
You could write a plug-in using the VI API to make data from vCenter part of a service bus application.
But you would end up having to you'd have to grab events control for that.
Yeah.
It's not built in. It won't just do it as per request.
Right.
I have a different question. It's something that sort of bubbled up in my head again. Talking about vShield and how vShield has evolved over the years and how it's become much better than it used to be. I wonder if there's been any changes in VMware thinking about what used to be VMsafe APIs. The hypervisor introspection. When they came out, it was really welcomed by a lot of partners in the ecosystem because it gives you a lot of visibility on what's going on. You can think of some novel security approaches and so on. So I wonder if vShield products are they still based on what used to be VMsafe, and is there any thinking in VMware about creating a new incarnation of those APIs?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the NetX APIs are about, is to really move away from the VMsafe APIs, where if you think of, let me give you a quick comparison. So if you look at what we did with EPSec or endpoint security, how we basically, the kernel components that have to be installed, we kind of create a generic kernel component. So to allow for the offloaded AV and those types of things, we needed to do that for the network. You mentioned that there was a lot of partners and a lot of folks in the ecosystem that really welcomed that. The problem was the bar to actually develop a solution was way too high for those partners. We actually, in reality, there's a very limited number of partners that actually ever did have a VMsafe enabled product. You can count them on two hands max, and I think if I'm thinking off the top of my head, you may even be able to count them on one. So it was a fairly.
So you need two hands.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
And the problem was that they were deprecated before people could really get into it. I feel like if you gave them a bit more time, there would be more solutions.
That's part of it. And part of it though is the fact that with those APIs, you had, as a vendor, had to create a VM kernel component. And if you're no VMware at all, we're not big fans of anybody creating those VM kernel components and really and inserting anything into our kernel that's not ours or that we haven't fully vetted out. And the problem with doing that across a wide spectrum of vendors is we have to support that, and we have to have the ability to certify every single one of those. So it becomes a very big problem from a scaling perspective as well, all of those. So the new model that we've got is these NetX APIs. It's our ecosystem framework, essentially we call that, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, but it gives the ability for our partners to essentially insert in the same mode, except we're going to create that kernel module and all the VMsafe type components. Again, VMsafe in and of itself is gone, but we're going to create those
because it's still used. So there's still people that have it out there and using it. You can't just get
right. Exactly. So we're not just going to pull the rug out from under those folks. Now that said, we're migrating those folks to these new sets of APIs. And what the new sets of APIs allow us to do is we do the enforcement, and you can set your policies on top of that and integrate to that. So think of it in the terms of like a network programmable tap, where we can send you based on, I think it's a 12-tuple filter, send you specific traffic that only you would want to see, and then you can make decisions based on that, and then inject packets back in to go ahead and and get in line, if you will, to provide the protection. For example, IPS or layer 7 type firewalling. So some partners that we're working with in that area, for example, are like Palo Alto Networks. We're working with those folks. We're working with folks like Juniper again to kind of move them over. Trend Micro is already developing on the new sets of APIs. So the idea there is to lower the bar, make it a lot easier to integrate to those APIs so we don't have to certify every VM kernel module that every vendor wants to create and go through that process. Michael can attest to that, in his past and some of the issues that we had there to work through those VMsafe APIs. So, yeah, we may be able to have kept that program open longer, potentially had additional partners in there. But I think the direction we're going now is actually a lot better direction because it lowers the bar and it makes it a lot easier for these partners to be able to integrate with these new sets of APIs.
Okay.
Well, that begs the question, are we going to are you going to open up the APIs so that not just partners can integrate with them, but anybody? For example, I mean, if I have a great idea for a new security tool, you're going to open up so that the open source community can start writing stuff, or that, you know, I, as a small company that just can't afford to join the for a fee thing, wants to do it without support, could try to do it.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but this makes it a whole lot easier to do that. Put it that way.
Okay. This seems to be the one thing that seems to be missing from the whole picture is the ability to have the open source community join in and write new security tools. And what about the vSwitch API? Could, like, the open vSwitch community start playing in that area? And now that you've bought Nicira, they're built on the open vSwitch. I'm assuming you're going to be taking that functionality and putting it into your vSwitch. Or do you know if there's plans, and I know you may not be able to talk about this, plans to actually put open vSwitch inside of vSphere?
Yeah, I can't talk specifics about that. I can tell you there's a lot of integration work going on right now. We're kind of laser focused on getting that out there fairly quickly. When I say fairly quickly, I mean I wouldn't expect it in the next few months type of thing. But we are definitely doing a lot of integration because we believe Nicira is quite the strategic investment. So we believe the technology is really a game changer, and the concepts around the technology are game changers. So, yes, there's a lot of work going on to integrate that. As far as opening up vSphere, I don't know that will happen. I don't know, though. You can never say never in this industry. But, and again, I can't really answer for that because that's well above my pay grade. But I will say, that, with VMware joining OpenStack and the fact that, we're part of that, I mean, there will be a lot of, collaboration in ways that we can be a part of that kind of the more open source cloud stack type environment.
So, Rob, you mentioned, the new APIs, it sounds like they only give you access to the networking, network traffic, and ability to set a security policy for networking. But the old VMsafe also allowed you to introspect into, say, a VM execution stream, VM, instruction execution stream. So you could come up with security products that would say block malicious instructions and something like that. So
we have one vendor that actually leveraged those, and that was it. Because I mean that potential was, it was really cool potential there. We didn't really have anybody take us up on that too much. So that one, there's a lot of talk there internally about what we're going to do there. I can't really talk too much about that, but I will say that, very cool. The CPU memory API is what we call vCompute at the time. Very interesting stuff. Very strong solution. The challenge was, again, that went to the whole next level of depth. That would probably be, if we're going to build additional APIs and to be able to control those types of things, that would be the natural progression, right? So we did the endpoint, the storage side of things. Now we're going to the network side of things. Yeah, the natural progression you would think is to somehow abstract those out and give that capability. That's something that I can't really discuss too much, though, right now. And again, to be perfectly honest, I don't know much about what the plans are there.
Yeah, but as you say, it would be really useful, I think, to some people.
You only had one company using the VMsafe Compute or VMsafe MEM. It was IBM.
Correct.
But you had 3 or 4 using the VMsafe Net to do the fast path integration. Other than that, I don't know of anybody else that had any other VMsafe type product.
Yeah, there wasn't. I mean, IBM did both, right? They used both Net as well as the CPU memory, and the CPU memory usage was actually fairly limited. Even then, I mean, really, they were just doing, looking in memory for rootkits is essentially what they were doing. So they weren't really doing any instruction manipulation or anything like that. And like you said, we had Juniper, who was Altor at the time, and Reflex, and Checkpoint, or the others that I can think of off the top of my head right now that actually did anything. So, true VMsafe solutions, I'm thinking now. I mean, I can't think of any more than the 5 that we just talked about. So
well,
again,
there was about 7 at VM SafeNet that I know of, but not many. You're right. It's a very small community.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the others.
Let's change the subject in the last little bit. At VMworld, you guys had a meeting of people that are interested in government-level security. How did that turn out? What came up there? You attended. I tried to get there, but was busier than a one-arm paper hanger.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was pretty busy. It was, and the funny thing is, we went really long in that too. It was supposed to be an hour. I had to leave early, but they kept going after a while. So I mean, there was a couple things discussed. Initially, we talked about the STIG. And the fact that we're still, we're working with DISA, and DISA is talking about having something in the time frame of about in the October time frame to have a draft for the STIG out. So that's that's pretty exciting, and that'll be based on ESXi, which will be good. So so we won't have the question of what applies and what doesn't apply anymore for ESXi. The more important thing that was talked about was our one of our guys, Simon Mijovic. He is one of our core SI folks that does professional services and works with our SI team, and he's working with our engineering teams on developing the BCBA appliance that is going to be pre-STIG, so that it meets your CNA. So really, it's just a matter of environmental components that need to be configured. But other than that, everything else will be pre-STIG, from the web services to all of the application services, and everything will be STIG based on the apps. The web server STIG, the application server STIG, the database STIG. All of those will be pre-done on that. So out of the box, you're going to have a pre-STIG appliance ready to go, and all you're going to have to do is configure a few of the, like I said, the environmental type components.
So we know the VMware hardening guide doesn't really cover quite a lot that happens inside the console, but there are some things that are inside the POSIX environment that should be hardened as well. I mean, you guys use certain PAM modules that you guys don't talk about in the hardening guide. You have if you are allowing logins, you need to consider all that as well. Are those being considered as part of the STIG, or are you thinking about changing the hardening guide, or what?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that. As far as the STIG, I don't believe that is being addressed in the STIG, although they do have a lot of that from the Unix STIG, so they do want to apply. I know some of that. Again, we're gonna have to. I haven't even seen what their draft is going to look like just yet. So I saw some early stuff that they did, but it was very early at the time. So as far as hardening all those internal components, I think again, it's from a permission standpoint, all those types of things. I don't know. Again, a lot of that stuff doesn't necessarily apply because it truly is. It's more of a single user type environment. But that said. Yeah, I don't know, to be honest with you.
We started off the conversation that people log into it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, and that's something that we need to consider. But when I say single user, I mean there's a single level of user. There's not the concept of multi, different permissions.
Not anymore,
for different
don't you? I mean, now we have those delegate users, so you have multiple users.
Well, there are multiple users. There's not multiple user context, though, when you log into the shell. Everybody's root when they log into that shell, and that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I agree with you there, but it still needs to be honest, I think there needs, is there a thought about doing multi-level security there?
Multiple levels in the shell? No, because it's considered like a single user mode at this point, and it's really, again, like you said, while people are logging into it, there's really nothing you can do in there other than troubleshoot, right? It's not designed, you can't go out and download files to it. You can't, from within there, without really going through some severe gyrations to do that. And even then, I'm not even sure how you would do it. You can't go and, surf the web from there. You don't have all those components in there, so it's not like it's a user environment that a user can do anything from other than, basic, some deeper troubleshooting mechanism. But honestly,
or cause massive problems by deleting VMDKs. I mean,
right, but if they,
scribbling all over the file system. I mean, you can do a lot of damage down there.
But at that point, it's not like you're infecting the system. I mean, you're deliberately doing that. When you log in as that user, that is all being, that's all being logged, sent out by a syslog. That's something that multiple levels of use. The only type of user that should be able to get in there is the root level user, and that's it.
No, I agree with you. That's why we keep on saying it's a break glass item.
Yeah.
I mean, the last time I logged into my service console was to fix a broken distributed virtual switch.
Right, and that's actually interesting. The broken, and the interesting thing there is now with the new functionality of the VDS, you bring that up, is this rollback and recovery. Is if you make a mistake in your VDS configuration, you have the ability without going in there to roll back to the last known state. Good state. So you can now put all of your management networks on the VDS. That's kind of one of the enhancements in the VDS has been that ability to do that. So in theory, you can go away completely from the standard switch and put all your VM kernel networks and everything within the VDS now because we fixed that issue of basically blowing yourself up by goofing up and making a configuration change and locking yourself out. So.
Yep.
So that's the idea there. But point being is that if you're going into the shell, that means you are a root level user. So the people, yes, you shouldn't give if you're going to use Active Directory, that group that's able to use that should be highly, highly limited, like we talked about, because that is your, again, you can do some pretty nasty stuff within there.
Yeah, the only reasonable, the one suggestion I would make, so you don't have to go all the way into, doing like an SE Linux type solution, is you could have an enable command like a lot of appliance manufacturers do, router switch manufacturers do. So that way when you first log in, you're kind of read-only, and then have an enable command before you can actually start making settings and changes. But what we're talking about is reasonable. You're not supposed to be logging in there anyway.
And actually, the one that's
when I have CLI access and I have there's all sorts of access I can get into this environment. And while they're limited, they're easy to override. The question I always have is, why in the world am I allowing my virtualization admins to actually see the data residing in the VMFS when they have no right to see it?
You shouldn't. Yeah, you shouldn't. And then that's where lockdown mode comes into play as well, right? At least then when you disable lockdown mode, that's going to be logged. And then once you've logged in, everything that you do when you get in there is going to be logged. So you have to go through a number of steps, if you're using lockdown mode, of course, to get in there. So it's going to be a pretty deliberate thing at that point to get in there. And again, you should still, just as a general good security practice, is limit the amount of users that can get in there. Okay. And again, have that break class object. We can debate this one all day, but I think we're all in. I think we're all in agreement. We're all in I think we're all in agreement as to what the best idea here is.
Okay. Well, given that now we got 5 more minutes, so anything else come out of the that little meeting about the government, the Fed space?
No, again, it's this whole concept of secure by default. Is one of those things that we're again everything that we're developing towards, not just this this appliance, but all of our products is towards that secure by default. So it's one of those. That was really the core of it, of what we talked about at that meeting.
Okay. And anybody? Okay. Well, we got a couple minutes left. So last thoughts, Michael Berman, you're up.
I'm looking forward to the new net applications.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it for me. We can talk about the bundling and the pricing changes. I think that's going to have a significant effect on the market as well. But that's not a technical conversation. That's just a pure market.
Okay. Eben, you're next.
Well, I got to say, I'm really glad or happy to see that VMware is putting so much effort into security. The fact that Rob's been there so long and continues to be that evangelist is that light is perfect. And I'm glad to see the improvements that they've made in their products to show a lot of companies might have given up or let a third party do a lot of that stuff, but VMware's seems to be keep up in the game, so it's great, and I like to see that.
Boris?
Yeah, well, I'd like to echo Eben's sentiment that I applaud VMware for improving security. Additional thought is that hypervisor is really becoming the basic operating system. It sits on the obviously it sits on the on hardware, and it's the foundation upon which everything the new data center going forward is going to be. And it's great to see that VMware is realizing that and exposing more and more functionality to the ecosystem, like this new net APIs could be used for security. So I'd like to see more of it. I'd like to see more active ecosystem participating in basically instrumenting this new operating system so that it's robust, secure, it can be customized in many different ways. I think the more VMware exposes some of the internals here in the right way, the more interesting the future will become. Okay. And interesting in a good way.
Well, before I hand it off to Rob, I just want to say one thing, is that 2 takeaways you can take away today from the system, from this podcast. One is make sure you have service accounts that are unique per element, management element, or management construct, and to also ensure that you have limited access to those the vSphere ESXi consoles. Other than that, personally, I would like to see those new APIs made available to anybody so that we can get a richer set of security tools made available, perhaps. And Rob, you're not last here today.
You know what? I appreciate you inviting me on. I always enjoy having a conversation with you guys. I think it's always fun. Michael and Eben saw you guys and everybody at VMworld. It was good to see everybody. And I think we're doing some really exciting stuff. We didn't even talk about app and all the changes made to the UI of app. That's had a huge facelift and there's a lot of great improvements. But again, I think hopefully what you see here is, and like Eben said, is we really have a dedication to security. We're now split off into its own separate business unit of network and security. So it's obviously a high priority for us, and because we see that the need is there for our customers. If we want everybody to move to this cloud model and to this model of this dynamic software-defined data center, we need to provide those software-defined solutions to build out that software-defined data center. And that includes network and security. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this version of the Virtualization Security Podcast.
crying. So much fear.